And hello everybody, all about the gyro here. Greetings to you from a sunny but quite cold Nashville. It's Wednesday after the Daytona 24-hour endurance race online. So this is part 2 of vlog number 4. If you have not seen part 1 yet, stop this, watch that one first, and then watch this. It will give you some context. So in this part 2, I wanted to cover quite a few things and try to do it succinctly. So first of all, what was the trending data of the Daytona 24 hours? Well, it was very, very interesting. Firstly, the Porsche was the most popular car, but in terms of overall wins, the Corvette did better than the Porsche. Additionally, especially in the second time slot, the trend was very strong that in the lower strength of fields, the Corvette was the preferred car, and in the upper level splits, the Porsche was the preferred car. Now, add to that a lot of BMW M8 teams were in the upper echelons racing, some of them for contractual reasons, others because they disliked the car. When you take those out, the BMW M8 was rarely seen in the mid and low level splits. As a matter of fact, there were splits where no BMW GTE was to be found. So what does this all mean? Well, in math, we call it a bimodal distribution. So picture a curve that has 2 peaks on it. The first peak will be the highest strength of field. The Porsches were out in force. Then there's a lull, and then a second peak in the lower strength of fields. You saw the Corvette be dominant. Now, what was the crossover split? Well, looking at it through the first pass, it looks like the 35th split at an average strength of field of 1776 was the crossover point, as in it was the most evenly distributed. There were 6 BMWs, I believe there were 6 Corvettes, 8 Porsches, and 7 Ferraris in that. I may be inaccurate on the exactitudes, but what I did notice was a very even distribution. So what does this mean for me? Well, clearly the car that I will be driving going forward will be the Corvette. I have Rick right now working up a livery. The fact that the Corvette is made in Kentucky adds to the livery's charm because we're driving literally the car of the region that I live in. So very interesting data. One other thing is there were multiple splits where the leader in second place drove the same number of laps. So once again proving iRacing's superior arrangement when it comes to large scale participation. Math does work. So, as aforementioned, we will be racing the Corvette going forward. The other thing is we are going to cut back our Michelin Pilot Challenge participation just because we need to devote more time into driving GTE so that we can improve. So we're taking the long-term view on this, and I think it's the right decision for myself to continue to grow as a driver because iRating is not everything, as we know. From previous videos of generalization versus specialization, if you have not seen my response video to Annie, you should watch that. It makes for some good insight. So that's the first major topic. The second one is my general approach to endurance racing, it comes down to four things. The first thing is understanding the race itself. That means understanding the track, the cars, the strengths and weaknesses thereof, and figuring out what your role is on your team. Secondly is, of course, practice. You can't show up to an endurance race like this and do maybe an hour's worth of practice and say, I'm good, and then expect to get the maximum out of yourself. I spent more time driving Daytona and practicing for this event than I did even for Zolder. I put in, looking at my statistics, over 300 and I think the final number is like 320 odd. So I'm going to say over 300 laps driving both LMP2 and GTE cars to be prepared for this race. So I knew I was prepared for this race. It also reinforces how important driving 6-hour endurance races are. So EES is definitely going to take some priority on certain Saturdays. But I think the other thing too is just the simple fact that I know where my strengths are and I know where my weaknesses are. So that all falls into preparation. Number 3 is do some historical analysis. Find some old results, find some old video. Understand where your problem spots are, both in driving the circuit, but also understanding like pit lane deltas and when should you double stint, when should you triple stint. So historical analysis is very important. And then number 4, and I think the most important of all, is know that it's a grind, but have enjoyment while doing it. It is understandable if people are salty at the end because they're tired, they're worn out. And it's understandable if you're salty at the beginning because you spent all this time and something has happened to you on lap 1, lap 2. What I didn't understand was there were multiple splits that I was perusing that Saturday on Twitch and YouTube where in the middle of the run where right now you're just logging time, the race has settled out, and you have these mini races within the big race because of your class and your category and strategy, the amount of salt at times was excessive. And there were some untoward actions that have now been reported. I am hoping that iRacing takes a very dim view to a few of these. And to really squash this behavior. And to iRacing's credit, they have provided an extensive statement of this is what happened, this is why it happened, here's how we're adjusting it. They have tentatively thrown up the idea of maybe having an additional time slot. A lot of people are like, no, they're freaking out. I actually think you should, just because it gives you more schedule flexibility as a team principal. It will even out a little bit of the load, but you do it in such a way where if you try to double dip, it becomes very hard to. So for Daytona, yeah, I would have added a third time slot that started at 0800 UTC, and now I cater to Europe and North America just the same as I did 6 hours after the fact, and now you have 3 time slots. The problem with that is people don't want split dilution. It's a difficult topic to manage. So the last thing to mention in this is I wonder why the patch has been delayed for 2 days. So they have announced maintenance, And we haven't done any racing this week because we were waiting for the patch. So we may have to do one just to get one in. But going forward, I realize I need to drive not only in the IMSA Championship more, but I may need to drive both GT3 and use that as my reconnaissance of the track and the races, and then GTE as my preferred. In the future, I have been asked by multiple groups to come alongside and do endurance racing with them. That is my strong preference, is to do endurance racing. And so I need to make sure that I stay fluent in the cars that are to be used. Specifically in IMSA, you have the Huracan and the M4 prototype. The Huracan drives very similar to an Audi. It's a very shallow curve. I actually like driving the Lambo a little more than the Audi. But the M4 prototype I'm not very familiar with, so I need to drive that with consistency, and I may end up driving that in Season 2. And in GTE, of course, we're going to be in the vet. And yes, I do have the LMP2, and, you know, maybe I need to drive that a little bit as well, just to maintain fluency. Well, if I do that and only have to learn one track and drive multiple classes, now you get to run 3 championships, and you only have one hurdle to jump. So right now, with the fact that disc golf is starting to crop back up, the fact that, you know, we've rounded the corner in winter. Right now it's at the end of January. We're about to go into February. So hopefully the weather won't be too egregious. There's a balancing out that happens, and I knew this was coming in. I never thought it would be this severe with that. So that's pretty much about it. I hope all of you are well. Make sure you take care of yourself, take care of one another. And this week, we're at Suzuka, one of my favorite places in the world. If not the most favored, because it's a track that tests the car and the driver to the maximum. So really looking forward to the challenge. So that's about it for now, and we will see you a little bit later. Take care, everyone.